So it looks like we are live. Okay, welcome everyone to our session 2, which is representation in cycling. We're going to wait a little bit, make sure you're good to go. So it looks like we're live. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and begin by introducing all of our panelists for today. I'm going to start with Alexa Everson, who is a Youth Best Program Coordinator and is also part of the Black Foxes. We have Stephen Wilkie, who is a digital content creator for Scott Sports, Evelyn Dong, who is a professional mountain bike racer with Juliana Strum and a mechanic with Storm Cycles, and Jose Maldonado, who is the Vice President of Marketing and Communications for People for Bikes. So if we want to begin with Alexa's session, and then we'll move on.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today for this discussion. My name is Alexa Everson. My pronouns are she, her. I am a Black woman who lives and recreates on Goshute and Eastern Shoshone land. Many still consider the details of that introduction to be excessive or unnecessary. I've heard comments like, what's with the pronouns? Why are we bringing race into this? But I firmly believe that it's the expression and ownership of these identities that affords others the opportunity to acknowledge how we exist in these spaces. My Blackness and femininity, unfortunately, determine my circumstances because the reality is that we are not all treated equally because our society has been established through centuries of institutional systemic policies, practices, and economic and political structures that place marginalized racial, ethnic, and gender groups at a disadvantage. I have experienced this myself growing up in a majority Black and Latinx neighborhood in inland San Diego, where my schools had minimal access to extracurricular activities due to lack of funding. Bike facilities were practically non-existent and still are. And it was considered unconventional for me to ride my bike anywhere as a young Black woman because it was. We had no access or exposure to images of people like me on bikes, so I never considered it a possibility. Sure, I got a Looney Tunes Huffy bike when I was a kid, and I rode it until the training wheels fell off, but that was about it until college. It took going to college in Santa Barbara about 10 years ago for me to discover cycling as a worthy activity. The overwhelming popularity of cycling on campus and the dense network of bikeways made it hard not to get into riding. It's the kind of peer pressure I can be thankful for. But it's worth noting that, although everyone was riding bikes, I was still pretty intimidated. I was a significant minority, there being less than 3.5% Black students. So I always felt like I wasn't doing cycling right, like I needed to dress differently, I needed to ride differently or get a better bike. Because most of what I saw was white people on nice bikes that their families could afford. And some of them were even racing, which I had not even considered as a possibility. So even though I was kind of dipping my velo toes in the water of cycling, I was still really apprehensive to take it any further than just commuting. I had no role model to emulate. I didn't have a Lance or Kristen Armstrong, the representation of cyclists did not include an image of my likeness. Thankfully, I'm stubborn and determined to do things that seem impossible. And since then, I've rode road, gravel, and mountain bikes. I've bike packed. I've led group rides. I've worked as an active travel guide in cycling. And now I get to work as an educator for Bike Utah and an advocate for the Black Foxes. But that's all to say that, this journey that got me into cycling was an exceptional one. It did not come naturally at all because I had no blueprint. I've only been lucky enough to cross paths with certain individuals who invested their energy in helping me expand the horizon of possibilities on bikes for me. And I'm thankful for that. But as I now reside in Utah, I can't help but think about the 1.6% of Black people across the state that are very likely having the same experience, missing out on an awesome time on bikes because they don't feel like it's for them. They don't see themselves on billboards, magazines, or in commercials. They don't see themselves working in the bike shops or commuting on bikeways, maybe partially because they don't have the access or because their schools don't have funding for bike programs or cycling teams because the events aren't happening in their neighborhoods. All in all, representation of all races, ethnicities, genders, and abilities in cycling is important because when another group is included, the individuals of that group are empowered to participate. And then they get buy-in to the development of their communities to support cycling. I can hardly imagine the impact I could have had already in my community had I known the possibilities sooner. Utah is also a beautiful place to ride, and I think everyone should feel welcome to do so. Rather than depending on exceptional people like me and these marginalized groups to push their way through silent barriers, industry leaders and organizations must take it upon themselves to include these groups internally and externally through employment, marketing, sponsorship, and outreach. You know, just as systemic racism cannot be dismantled by one person or an individual act, neither can, the detriment from the lack of representation. The industry has the power and influence to make a real difference in this. Lulu, you can take it
from there. Alexa. Sorry. Thank you, Alexa. Now we're going to move on to Stephen, and you can go ahead and take the floor.
Hey guys, I'm Stephen Wilkie. I'm here representing people with disabilities. I was born with a physical disability called Poland syndrome. And I guess I'm just going to be talking more about my story with this and cycling. And so growing up, I like bikes and everything. Just riding around the street, exploring, getting freedom, the freedom that only, like as a kid, you get that, you just go a little bit further and a little bit further. Mom gets mad, pulls you back. But as I got older and in college, I started commuting. And I'm like, man, I really like this. So then I joined, went to Texas A&M. I joined the cycling team there. And still, nobody there had a physical disability. I couldn't relate to anybody. I really didn't race. And like Alexa said, like I had no real role models on this. And I didn't have anybody there to take me under their wing and like, hey, this is how you can ride your bike with the disability. And then kind of sidestepping of that, also before this too, I've been hiding my disability my whole life. So that was a big impact on me. Hiding it gave me great anxiety, depression my whole life. And cycling kind of gave me the freedom to feel normal. But I still never accepted or even came out to anybody because my disability is very easily hidden. So then I started volunteering at the National Deli Center in Park City. And with that, I started being around other people with disabilities. And my whole life, I never really had that chance. And so as I started volunteering there with the mountain bike program, like I just started seeing other people and like they're happy. They have a disability, they don't care. So then I started feeling more comfortable with myself. And then I had like a coming out on Facebook. I was like, hey, everybody, I've had a disability my whole life. I've hidden them. I know some people may know, most people don't know. And so that was my freedom with cycling. So cycling gave me the freedom to accept myself and getting involved with organizations that help others like you or like me with a disability. That was like, it was totally life-changing. And now that's brought me to where I'm at now with now that I've gotten in these groups with people with disabilities, everybody's like, oh, you should race paracycling. And that's something I've never thought of, basically, because I never accepted myself as a person with a disability. And so now I got, I guess the last year through COVID, I was going to start racing then, but it all got delayed. But so this year, like, everything's falling together with, you had to get your disability classified with the Olympic Committee. So I got classified. My first race is in April. I have goals of the Paralympics. My coach is actually the Team USA national coach, and he believes I can get in the team. So everything's happening now, which is really awesome. But then just going back a little bit though, with racing, I know the answer to this when I email all these race directors. I'm like, hey, do you have a paracycling group or paracycling category in your race? And everybody's like, no. And everybody just says no and just leaves it at that. But with the midweek mountain bike people, I emailed them this past year. And I'm like, hey, do you guys have a para mountain biking class? And they're like, no, but we might be interested. And so just through that email now this year at the midweek mountain bike, they're actually going to have a para mountain bike race, which is basically, it's like one of the first ever. There's no para mountain biking. There's no, like with paracycling racing, there's no mountain biking at all. So this is kind of like the first of its kind. And so like my goal is to get mountain biking in the Paralympics. So I have big goals and I think it can happen, but my step now is to at least get to the Paralympics as a cyclist and get a bigger platform. And so once I get that platform, I can help others, like how I was, where I was hiding my disability or I thought I couldn't do anything high performance until I met people like me. And yeah, that's my story.
Thank you for sharing, Stephen. That was really powerful, and we hope to see you in the Olympics, Paralympics soon. We're going to move on to Evelyn.
Okay, my name is Evelyn Dong, and I am a professional mountain biker for Juliana Schramm, and I also am a mechanic at Storm Cycles. And I think my early story is actually pretty similar to Alexa's. I was not in any sort of like athletic community growing up. I had a really junky old Huffy that I would commute to school on, and it was a pretty good commute. And I would cut through all these like backyard trails and end up all muddy going to school. And I was that weird kid, but I never saw myself like as a cyclist or a mountain biker, even though like that is mountain biking. Now I see it, but I think there's just that divide that, like, obviously I'm not a mountain biker because my people don't mountain bike, but that's what I was doing. And I actually didn't start mountain bike racing until I was 25 or 26, because I didn't see myself doing that. I didn't see that it was a possibility. And I am glad I finally started, but I so wish I had like let myself try that earlier and put myself into that world. And that's something I still see like working at the shop. And I think it's pretty like common in cycling culture and in shops to have this divide between like people who ride bikes, which is so many people, and cyclists. And I think that's one of the things we need to really work on in the bike world, is to get rid of that stigma. see what else, and in the race world, yeah, that is definitely a whole another topic of how to get more people of color into racing itself, because there are so few of us to represent right now. So kids, even if they see if we start putting people in ads, that's like one small step. But yeah, community programs, we really need to just, I try to coach our youth program locally, just to get more kids into cycling, and that's where we need to start. So that's my story.
Thank you for sharing, Evelyn. I think you've brought up some really great points during your story, and we hope to see more kids on bikes soon, because it really does start there. And we're going to start with Jose next, so you have the floor.
Hi, everybody. I want to first thank the panelists for their bravery. This is just incredible to hear their stories, and it really hits on the theme that we're talking about today. My name is Jose Maldonado. I represent People for Bikes. We are the industry trade organization. We also have an advocacy arm. We work every day to get more people on bikes more often, to make biking better for everyone. I'm here to discuss how we're working with the industry, other advocacy partners, on how we can make biking more inclusive at every level. Some of you might feel the same way I do, and that is, we feel like the bike is the solution. And of course, it doesn't solve every problem, but we envision, as we think about more people riding more often, the bike does have a connection to our daily lives, improving our health, connecting our communities, boosting the economy, strengthening the nation, and yes, protecting the planet. So if we want more diverse biking community, industry, we have to be inclusive. And I think that's what we're trying to tell everyone here today. What does that mean? It means we need to be welcoming. We need to make space. How do we show or provide a sense of belonging? I belong here. You belong here. We just heard from Alexa, Stephen, and Evelyn. I think this is really important. I grew up in urban Newark, New Jersey. Had no idea what riding a bike was. Learned to ride a bike at an older age. First foray into the access was when I moved out of urban environments and landed in Utah, and it opened up this incredible new place. But I was fortunate. When we say we want to make biking better for everyone, it's not a question. There's no question mark at biking for everyone. Yes, we mean everyone. Race, gender, sex, and ability. So that's a challenge. How do we weave this into the fabric of everything we do? And it's a process. And speaking again for People for Bikes, in 2020, June 2020, we shared our first action plan to fight racial injustice within the bike industry, advocacy, and our own organization. So as we reflect on some of those challenging moments in our nation's history, unsettling rise of hate crimes across the US, we acknowledge the most difficult work is actually, this is just the beginning. And the bike isn't going to solve some of these complex problems, So in 2021, we continue to self-examine, share our progress, communicate why this work is vital to the future of, and here are the words that I want everyone to hear, a future of a safe, thriving bicycling community and industry for all. So today, I wanted to touch on 3 things, and we'll just breeze through this. I know there's not a lot of time, and I was going to show a presentation, but I think I'll just kind of use my words. So there's 3 things. If we want to do 3 things, what are they? And that is, we need to educate ourselves, operationalize equity, and we need to amplify voices. We need to be intentional about that. So for us, the industry, advocates, in order to create that meaningful change within the bike industry and community, we first need to figure out where we are in all of this, our own understanding of the issues and challenges that exist. Why is this important? Simply because we have to meet people where they are. I don't know. I don't know what you know. I don't know what you've been through. You might know what I've been through. But do we all have a real basic understanding of what anti-racism is, or mobility justice? And that's sort of where we started, and that is educating ourselves, our staff, surveying, understanding on anti-racism, mobility justice. We ask for feedback. Do we have the right tools? Do you know enough? We developed resources, readings, podcasts, volunteer guidance. We invited, we were working with Camber to understand the building blocks of DEI. We're investing in professional development. We're working with the bike industry to understand their level of understanding through surveys, through our board. This is really important, right? And I think as we think about advocates, or communities, we launched an ambassador program to ensure that we're representing folks from all walks of life. We launched what we called the Advocacy Academy to help decision makers, city officials, other advocates create better bike infrastructure wherever they are. The second piece here is operationalizing equity. How important is that? And I come back to this, how do we weave this into the fabric of our organizations, your peer groups? Our senior management team did a self-survey as we looked around for someone to support us on our journey. It's eye-opening, to understand that, wow, I wasn't as woke as I thought I was, or I didn't know as much as I thought I did. How do we weave this into our operations, our programs, our hiring? How do we create better job descriptions or job postings, job boards to ensure that we are being welcoming? Using language that actually resonates with a broader population of folks. So finally, I'll talk about amplifying voices because, I'll pick on Alexa here, working with the Black Foxes. These are the voices of the people. We want them to tell their stories. It's not about me. But it is about who Alexa is comfortable working with. What photographer does she want to use? How do we create that space to give voices to the voices of the voiceless, the folks that have really they've never experienced this kind of welcoming feeling within the cycling industry, or haven't even seen it or heard it. Right down to the threads that people wear, right? The shoes that people have on, the pedals that are on your bike. It's important that everyone tells their story so that we can be more educated, so that we can get that perspective. So let's think about these three things: educating ourselves, operationalizing equity, however that might fit in your world. Let's think about how we could amplify these voices to make biking better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. You brought up a lot of great points. The reason we're having this panel is to amplify these voices and to hear directly from participants in the bicycling community that you wouldn't normally see at the forefront. With the pandemic, we've seen an increase of cycling, but we've also seen an increase in demand of different voices, and we're so excited and happy to have Alexa, Stephen, Evelyn, Jose share their experiences and be vulnerable on our stage today. Before we leave, I'm going to just ask one quick question. We all touched on not having access to resources. I myself didn't know where to begin. So is there a resource that you would all suggest for those who are interested? Oh, I'm so sorry. For those who are interested in continuing to learn more about your work or to get into cycling?
I guess I can go first. So as Jose mentioned and as Lulu mentioned, and I kind of barely spoke on, but I am a part of the Black Foxes, which is a collective of Black cyclists and outdoors people from all over. There are 8 of us, and we do try to make these connections with industry leaders and organizations and also just individuals to make sure that the narratives of all these marginalized people is being told their way, and basically just trying to foster a space to have these really difficult discussions. We have direct discussions with people who are in the industry working with different brands and organizations, and allow them to ask the hard questions and try to provide some guidance for them as to how they can really be supportive and try to be more inclusive and equitable in all the things that they're doing. We'll post a link to the Black Foxes website in the chat. So if you want to see more about that, and feel free to reach out, ask us questions anytime. But there are also resources there and information on some of the work that we've been doing. But you can also, foster this kind of space just as an individual, and also if you have the privilege of, overseeing an organization or running something or managing a program, you can make this space, more welcoming and inclusive by just allowing people to speak up and hear them out.
Thank you for sharing. For the rest of our speakers, if there are any resources that you would recommend or you would like to share for anyone who would like to dive deeper in what we're talking about today or who's interested in continuing cycling, you're welcome to share them. If Stephen, if you would like to add anything, Evelyn or Jose, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah, I can add one thing. So with the National Ability Center, I've met a lot of people with a range of abilities. And I've started, after my process of getting classified with the Olympic Committee for my disability, I've started recommending that to all my friends with disabilities that even if they want to race or not, it can get them involved. So I have a friend with cerebral palsy, and she's ridden a bike maybe 5-6 times. I've ridden with her most of those times, and she's on hand cycle. And I was like, hey, you should think about getting classified to race. And that sparked her. She's so excited about it. She's never had opportunity like this to do anything in an event like this. And now she was just diagnosed with MS as well. So she's definitely needs something to look forward to as her life's not great otherwise, but she's just like so excited. So I would recommend if anybody has friends with disabilities, just to get them involved. Like cycling is like an easy way to like be able to be there with them while they're doing their new activity, or to encourage them to try something new. And even if it is racing in the Paralympics, like it could end up to that. But I'd highly recommend anybody with friends with disabilities to try to get them on a bike. You can have them join the National Ability Center, and they have bikes there they can rent or take classes. But they can get them on a bike, they can check out a bike, and then if they want to buy one, they can totally buy one too. But there you go.
Thank you for sharing those resources with us. Evelyn or Jose, if you would like to add anything. We have 5 minutes left. So if you would like to add anything to that, you're more than welcome to. Well, we would like to thank our participants on our panel today for sharing their stories. We have also included some links throughout our session chat that you are more than welcome to go through. We've included Alexa's link for the black boxes. There should be an article for Stephen as well. And Evelyn, there have been some articles shared about you and your mountain bike racing career, which it's been said that you've been a little modest today, but I'm really excited to read these stories and learn more about you and your career. If there are any additional questions, we do have a couple of minutes that you can throw them in the chat. We would love to answer any.
I think if I can make like maybe 2 more comments, I'd love to, since we have the time.
Where's yours?
Thank you. Just a couple other things to touch on that I don't think we really have in this conversation, but I think one thing to make sure you address is that, you know, all of these identities, you know, race and gender and, you know, mobility, all of these things are not, you know, exclusive of one another. They overlap and intersect, and it makes every individual story super complex, which is awesome. But I think it's important to also note that, you know, that we can't just put individuals into a single box, and that there's a lot more to their story than just, you know, one identifying characteristic. So it's important to consider that, you know, when having conversations with people, when inviting them to participate in a space, when trying to make a space for them, just not limiting them to one identifying factor. And then the other thing is just, you know, I think a question when I have these kinds of conversations, or especially when the black boxes kind of put out information, some of the questions we get are kind of, you know, why should we increase representation of certain groups that are the minority? Like, why should, you know, we put out more images of people of color on bikes if that doesn't represent what the actual demographics are? And I think, you know, that question in and of itself kind of shows how exclusionary, you know, certain spaces can be, to have that mentality to think, well, you know, we don't want them to have more representation than what is the reality. But I think the way to see it is that creating more representation of these other groups that aren't normally represented, and even if they are the minority in that area or that space, creating that representation and showing their likeness invites them to that space. It makes them feel like, okay, I am invited and welcome to participate in this, because just seeing their image, you know, even though it may not be typical, would just make them feel more welcome. So just like going that extra mile to combat what the demographics may be and show that, no, we want these people in this space, regardless of whether they're here or not. I think that's really kind of the point, at least to me, of representation. But that's all I had to say.
Well, thank you, Alexa, for sharing that. On that note, we are done with our session. You can head to the lobby or next session. Thank you, Alexa, Stephen, Evelyn, and Jose for joining us today.
Thank you.